Hello, and welcome to another episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. How you doing? I'm John Murphy. I'm a writer and producer on the CBS Science and Technology series, Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca, which airs Saturday mornings, of course, on CBS. Check your local listings for airtime. And now I hop around the country talking to regular people and diners over dishwasher specials, which, by the way, is all egg whites and a big breast of chicken and vegetables and a big biscuit. Oh, yeah, the biscuit makes it. Garlic onion rings, banana splits, whatever. And I talk about their lives, their community, and how they feel about America. This is the final installment in a series of episodes surrounding a true crime and originates from the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis, Nebraska, home of $3 vodka sodas, which are great, and we could all use several rounds of those, I think, in America right now. This week, the full audio confession of Harold Nokes and how he and his wife Ina killed and cut up the bodies of a rural farm couple, Edwin and Wilma Hoyt. And it was all over a scandalous sexual relationship with the Hoyt's daughter, Kay Hein. Now, his confession has never been released to the public before, and let me give you a little bit of a warning. If you're triggered by discussion of violence and graphic details of what can be done to a human body, you might want to skip this episode. I'll also be talking once again with the former Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee about the case which happened 50 years ago in southwest Nebraska, and the author of the book about it called In Cold Storage, Mr. James Hewitt. Previously, we learned both Harold and Ina tried to lure Kay back into a three-way relationship after she broke it off with the Nokeses in the spring of 1973. When Kay wouldn't respond, Harold began harassing her, pouring sugar in her car's gas tank, poisoning her lawn, sending her a red light bulb for her porch. You get what that means, right? And painting vulgar comments about Kay's sexual prowess on local road signs, but claims he wasn't the only one who did. When Edwin and Wilma Hoyt went missing on a Sunday night in late September, and their body parts began washing up on the shore of a nearby lake 10 days later, Kay eventually admitted to law enforcement her relationship with the Nokeses, and that they might be responsible. And at the time, the shocking road signs reveal that Kay was in relationships with many different men. The challenge for the Sheriff's Department and the Nebraska State Patrol investigating these murders was that there was not a single piece of evidence pointing directly to Harold and Ina as the killers. It was all speculation. After planting eavesdropping devices for the very first time in the state of Nebraska in their home and listening to their conversations for nearly 3 weeks, the authorities felt they had enough probable cause to arrest the Nokeses. And when they did, they were separated. And after a few days, Harold finally broke down and confessed to Sheriff Roblee. Now, Harold had to do it all over again in front of county prosecutors. And this is what you're about to hear for the very first time. And as before, this is audio recorded 50 years ago on a reel-to-reel machine with a shitty, cheap microphone. Harold was soft-spoken, and the record heads on the machine got pretty dirty at times. So I did my best to clean it all up so you can hear it. And you will occasionally hear some spikes in the volume level. And I did that so you could actually hear and discern what Harold is trying to say. And let me clarify a point of discussion. Harold claims the Hoyts were most angry with he and Ina because Kay lived with them after a hospital stay. Kay was admitted to a hospital on 2 occasions during her relationship with them. The first time was in December 1972, after Kay hit her head on some kitchen cabinets and received a pretty severe concussion. The second incident occurred in the spring of 1973, when Kay attempted to take her own life and was hospitalized in Holdridge, Nebraska. After her release from the hospital in December, Kay chose to recuperate at the Nokes' home rather than with her own family, and this seems to be the biggest bone of contention between the Hoyts and the Nokeses. Now, before Harold begins his confession, Special Prosecutor Paul Douglas from Lancaster County and the future Nebraska State Attorney General runs down the charges Harold and Ina Nokes are facing. This is American Gothic, Love and Murder, Part 5.
That if this case were satisfactorily disposed of, you would be charged with a first-degree murder, one count of second-degree murder, first-degree murder of Mrs. Hoyt, second-degree murder of Mr. Hoyt. I want you to know that the penalty for first-degree murder is life or death, depending on what the judge chooses to impose as a sentence. And the sentence for second-degree murder is 10 years to life. You understand that?
Yes.
It was also discussed that your wife's cases would be amended and that there would be 2 counts of disposing of dead bodies against your wife. 1 count for disposing of the body of Mr. Hoyt and 1 count for disposing of the body of Mrs. Hoyt. The penalty for the offense of disposing of a dead body is also a felony and carries a penalty of 1 to 3 years in the Nebraska Penal and Correctional Complex. First-degree murder, which carries a penalty of life or death, is one that's up to the judge 100%, and that we are not in any way, that is the prosecution, either will attempt to influence the judge one way or another. Now, your attorney, I'm sure, will speak on your behalf and will try to have the judge be as lenient as possible. But I want you to know that there's no assurance that the judges may not impose a death penalty. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I understand.
Okay. So, as you walked into the house, where did you go?
From the time we went into the house, Mr. Hoyt was pretty loud with his conversation, and I made some remark to the fact that we didn't want all the neighbors to know we was having trouble or something. If he was going to make so much noise, we should go to the basement or something. He just took off to the basement. So,
had he been in your home before?
I'm not sure what he did some plumbing there. I don't know. He'd been at the house a time or two before. He went first, went downstairs.
He knew how to get downstairs?
He must have, because he went that way anyway.
Who followed him?
I did.
And where was his wife?
His wife and mine followed us down. Which one come first, I don't have any idea.
How was Mrs. Hoyt acting throughout all this?
She was a little more calm than he was at this time. She had been unhappy coming to town that she didn't get to take care of her daughter when she got out of the hospital on the way to town. And but at this particular time, why, he was the one that was talking a little loud.
Well, what was he doing when he was talking loud?
You mean what was he saying? Well,
yes.
He was said that I wasn't telling the truth, that I was lying to him about his daughter, that she wouldn't do that to him, and that I was just trying to get her to come over there, and they felt like I was trying to take their place as a parent, what they felt like.
Did they say those words?
They said that I was kind of shoving them out to take their place. But Kay, when something come up, that she was turning to us instead of turning to them for advice or things.
And then, did you go downstairs? Well, did you go downstairs?
Yes. He took off as soon as I said that we should keep our voices down a little on account of neighbors, or we ought to go to the basement. So he just took off. I was right behind him, and just as he got to the kitchen door, I turned the kitchen light on. And as soon as he got to the head of the stairs, I reached around and turned the light on down the stairs.
What did you do when you all went downstairs?
As soon as we got downstairs, the women and all of us was there in the family room. And Mr. Hoyt, he gave me a motion to come with him. And the washroom door was open. And as I got to the door, I turned the light on. And he walked across. To this day, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure he laid his glasses on the washer there. And then he turned and said that he'd had about enough of it, and he come at me.
What do you mean he came at you?
He was coming at me, he was going to hit me. I was standing just possibly one step inside the washroom door.
And where was your wife?
They was out in the family room someplace. I don't have any idea exactly where.
And where was Mrs. Hoyt?
They was out in the family room.
And when he came at you, where were you?
I was about one step inside of the washroom.
Right in front of the door?
Right in front of the door and standing by the deep freeze there.
How far inside of the room would you have been?
About one step, I would say.
And where was he?
He walked to the other side of the washroom and then started back.
What did he say after he took his glasses off?
He said he'd had about enough of this and going to sell it or something. Now I don't know exactly what he said, but
What did he do?
he started at me and made motions that he was going to hit me.
What do you mean by he made motions at you that he was going to hit you?
Well, he got one fist back, and I'd say he had his right fist back.
Did he grab you or anything?
He didn't get quite to me.
And what did you do?
I pulled out the gun and I thought I'd get him stopped, and just about the time he was ready to hit me, I shot him.
Now, let's talk about the gun. Where was the gun?
It was in my belt.
And did you pull it out?
Yes.
Did you have your coat unbuttoned at that time?
My coat would have been unzipped, unbuttoned.
And did you pull it out, gun out with your left hand?
I'm sure I did. My right arm I have very little use of it, especially at that time.
Can you use your hand now?
Well, I can use the hand part of it, but as far as
Could you hold a gun in it?
I could now.
You think you could have then?
No, I'm normally right-handed, but after the accident with my shoulder, pretty well come left-handed because I had to do everything I did with my left hand.
Had you ever shot a pistol with your left hand?
We did some practice with this. We took it out and did some target practice, and I shot at a coyote one day.
With your left hand?
I'm sure I did, yes.
Okay. When you pulled the gun out, how did you hold it?
Well, I just pulled it out, left hand, and pointed it at him. I thought
What part of it did you point to?
Oh, I hit him somewhere about in here.
Is that where you think you aimed it?
Well, I had to be where that's where I hit him.
You think he saw the gun?
If he did, it was just right at the time when it was fired. He did, because he never stopped coming.
Was he looking at you right smack in the face?
Yes.
You think he knew you had a gun?
No.
Have you the frame of mind that if he would have seen the gun, he still would have kept coming at you?
I don't know. He might have.
When he took his glasses off, how well could he see when he took his glasses off?
That I don't know.
You shot.
Yes.
And when you shot, what happened?
He staggered backwards and fell against the sink. Well, it bent towards a little bit of an angle.
And after he fell, what did you do?
I just stepped back, and Mrs. Hoyt started screaming, and she said, "Why didn't you kill Kay?"
Where was Miss Hoyt at that time?
At the time when I shot her,
Right after you shot.
Right after I shot, she come towards by right where I was at and said, screaming, and said, "Why didn't you kill Kay?" And started screaming. And
did she look you in the face?
I would say when it happened, I think so, but I couldn't tell you. I really don't know.
Did she go to her husband?
No, she started screaming and started up the stairs.
All she said to you is, "Why didn't you kill Kay?"
Yes.
And started to go up the stairs?
Yes.
And then what happened?
And I shot her.
Where were you when you shot her?
I was probably one step out of the washroom. She just started up the stairs. I was just more or less at the foot of the stairs. Outside of the knowing, I hear that scream every day since, and I remember that. But outside of that, most of it was kind of a blur.
Where was your wife?
She was in that family room someplace there.
And after Mrs. Hoyt started going up the stairs, you followed her?
She just got about one step or two up. I didn't.
Did you reach up to grab her?
I might have. I don't know.
Did you think Mr. Hoyt was dead?
I figured so, yes.
You've done a lot of hunting. That sure didn't make you think that he was dead, was it?
I didn't know it. I mean, I just supposed he was.
And then you shot her?
Yes.
After you shot Mr. Hoyt, did you go over to see if he was dead?
You mean between the time I shot her and him, though?
Between the time you shot him and you shot her, did you go over to see if Mr. Hoyt was dead? Did Mr. Hoyt say anything?
No.
Did he utter anything at all?
No, not that I heard it.
When he went down, could you see his face?
I probably could, but I don't remember.
Well, what made you think he was dead?
Well, he lit off hard.
He did what?
He lit off hard on the floor when he staggered back into the sink.
Well, he staggered back, and then his head hit the sink. I've never been in the basement, so I have trouble correlating all this.
Well, no, he'd have fell. The sink is right along the wall, and he started to fall before he got through the sink, and his head or shoulder would have hit the sink on the way down. So
did he fall backwards?
Yes.
And there was only one shot fired?
Yes.
And then you shot her how many times?
Once.
You know where you struck her?
I'm not sure, but I'd say back here someplace.
You indicate the middle of your back?
Yes, someplace in that area.
And after you shot her, what did she do?
She fell, and she lit right at the foot of the stairs.
And after she fell at the foot of the stairs, what did you do?
I sat down on the cot.
Where was your wife at this time?
She was still in the family room for just a second, and she went up the stairs to see if anybody was around to hear this. And when she come back, she said the neighbors that was out on their porch had their light on. and turned the light out and went back in the house. So we figured they must have heard the scream and the shot. Whether they did or not, I don't know, but we figured as much.
And then what did your wife do when she came back down the stairs?
As soon as she come back down, we sat there. And
sat where?
On the cot.
Either one of you two went to see if either one of those two are alive?
Mrs. Hoyt there was dead, I'm sure.
Why?
Just the look on her face. Her face was right up toward me.
Did you go look at her?
I was just within a few feet of her, yes.
Did you try to feel her pulse or anything?
No. I just knew she was dead.
By just looking at her?
I must have been, I don't know, it's something that just happened so quick. I just sat there for a little while.
Did you walk over and look at Mr. Hoyt?
No, I didn't go quickly. No, I could see where I sat on the cot.
Did you go see if he was dead or not?
No, not at that time.
Did your wife go see if he was dead?
I don't think so.
One or the other could have been alive, couldn't they?
I suppose that's possible.
What would you have done if he were alive?
I'd have probably called for help. I couldn't have done it again.
But you didn't know if he was dead, yet if you didn't hesitate to kill Mrs. Hoyt.
It just happened within a short time.
You know, what you're asking me to believe is that you went over there with a loaded gun, with nothing else except to talk to him. And then this older man came rushing at you without you trying to step aside or back up, or put your hands up, or tell him I've got a gun or anything. You just pulled out a gun and shot him, and without knowing whether he was dead or going over to see he was dead. And when his wife went screaming away, you shot her without trying to grab her and pull her back down the stairs, to talk with her, to go over and see if the husband was dead. Is that the picture you painted for me?
No, that's near I can say yes.
Holy shit. I mean, holy shit. To hear Nokes describe what happened in the basement of their home is just, it's unbelievable. And when you listen to Special Prosecutor Paul Douglas break down what Nokes is trying to sell him, it sounds much more cold-blooded to me than just a deadly overreaction to a potential punch in the face. Later in the podcast, you'll hear Douglas go after Nokes again on his motives for bringing a gun to meet with the Hoyts. And the author of the book, In Cold Storage, James Hewitt, explains why.
Harold talked about the handgun that he used to kill the Hoyts because he fell off the front porch while he was chasing Kay and said, "Oh, God, I've hurt my shoulder." He didn't have the capacity to bear the recoil of a shotgun or a rifle if you're hunting deer or anything like that. So he switched to a handgun. That was his story. And Douglas said that's bullshit.
He believes that Harold purposely brought a pistol to take care of a situation.
I think he thought there were some nefarious purposes to his acquiring that gun.
And then Wilma Hoyt screaming, "Why didn't you kill Kay?" It's hard to fathom a mother saying such a thing, but think about what had transpired over the course of 9 months for the Hoyt family. They learned their daughter was having an affair with a married couple, which, when examined through the lens of Midwest Christian morals 50 years ago, really kind of had to be shocking and repulsive on some level. Kay preferred to recover with the Nokeses after a hospital stay than with her own family. Then the humiliating road signs about Kay and her sexual exploits, the harassment, the back and forth with the Nokeses over blackmailing Kay. It was a lot to emotionally carry. So if Wilma did say those words, I'm sure it was out of pure anguish and fear, more so than it was hatred or anger for Kay. Unfortunately, the gruesome night was just beginning for Harold and Ida Nokes.
And your wife, throughout this entire period of time, was there in the family room and within a few feet of you and didn't know what was going on.
It wasn't a very long period of time, and I didn't say that she didn't know what was going on. As soon as I fired the gun, she knew what was going on. But until that time, why, she didn't know what was going to happen.
Well, didn't she say anything to you after you shot Mr. Hoyt?
You mean between the time I shot him and her?
Yes.
So that happened that quick. She might have said something that she did. I didn't hear it, but it just as soon as I shot him, she started running for the stairs, and all I could think, I couldn't let her get away, and she was past me, and I shot her.
But there's another question, but when you shot her, you intended to kill her. I don't know what you were intending. What were you intending? I mean, you could have reached up and grabbed her. You wouldn't have had any trouble dragging her back down the stairs. What I'm trying to say is it seems to me it's all very needless. I don't see any reason why you shot him. I should have think, if you were trying to scare him with a gun, which is what you indicate to me you were trying to do with him, you would have at least said, I've got a gun, stand back, or step aside, or don't, or I'll shoot you, or anything. You don't say anything. You pull a gun out and just shoot him. And you don't know to this day if he even saw the gun. I wouldn't imagine a man would come rushing at you like a bull if you had a gun pointed at him. Do you?
I don't know. I just happened to expect him. That's all I can think.
All right. Now after they're both there, you and your wife are sitting on the couch. What does your wife say? What do you say? What do you do?
I asked the wife to leave, and I called the law. And she said no, but she wasn't about to leave. I called the law, she was staying too.
So then what did you do?
I sat there for quite a while, and by that time I had checked to see if I thought they was both dead.
How did you check to see if they were both dead?
With her, I don't know, her eyes was open and her jaw was set. I just knew she was dead. And in my mind, I knew she was. And he was too, the way he was. So, I got sick 2 or 3 times.
What do you mean you got sick 2 or 3 times?
I threw up.
Where did you throw up?
I got upstairs to the bathroom before I threw up each time.
What was your wife doing all this time?
I couldn't get her to leave. I wanted her to leave, and I was going to call the law. She wouldn't leave.
And so then what'd you do?
Well, I wanted to try to get them out of the basement. And she said, well, what about the kids? And she said, you got to think about them a little. So I decided, well, I'd try to get rid of them. I couldn't begin to get them out of the basement. My arm at this time was still where I had very little use of it. I decided that the only way I could possibly get rid of them was to cut them up where I could handle them.
And when did you decide that?
Pardon?
When did you decide that?
Probably an hour after it happened. I would say an hour, between 1 and 2 hours.
So what did you do?
I cut them up.
Okay, which one did you cut first?
I cut everything first.
What was your wife doing when you were cutting them up?
She was upstairs part of the time. I told her I didn't want her to have anything to do with it. Later, she came down and helped on some of it to wrap some of them and laid them in the deep freeze until.
Okay, let's talk about him. What instruments did you use?
I used a knife.
What kind of knife?
Butcher knife. Butcher knife.
Where is that butcher knife now?
It's in the lake. Very junk lake.
How did you throw that in the lake?
Out of the boat.
What other instruments did you use?
To break some of the bones, I got an axe, and I used an axe.
Was the axe in your pickup?
Yes.
You were swinging the axe with one hand?
Yes.
Were you grabbing it short?
I would say probably midway, and my other hand would probably help some. I would say that I use my arm more in a case like that than you normally could force yourself to use them.
And did you have a particular pieces that you wanted to cut it up into? I mean, did you say to yourself, I want to cut it up into X number of pieces, or how you were going to go about cutting it up?
Just so I could get it where I could handle it good.
Was the blood running all over the floor there in the utility room?
Yes.
How about the head? How did you sever the head?
I had to use the axe to break the bones.
I'm sure this is not an easy thing for you to go through, and I am not trying to make it difficult for you, but as you, let's say you cut off a hand, then what would you do with the hand after you cut it off?
I had several pieces, and then I'd wrap some of them. And then she finally come down and wrapped some of the pieces.
So the big question is, just how involved was Ina the night the Hoyts were killed and dismembered? I met up with the man who broke Harold into admitting the crimes, former Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee. And again, I spoke with him at the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis, Nebraska.
Ina Nokes was a cold-blooded person. Harold had terrible emotional problems about what all had happened. Ina did not have. She was just solid. But on the other hand, I don't know that they sat down and planned a murder. Along with that, she was involved with everything Harold was doing anyhow, and I don't know that she would have. I would think that she knew Harold had a weapon and that there could be a murder.
That she did nothing to stop him.
That's right. And the involvement that she had was pretty serious too, and she would have known that Harold had the gun, could have
Well, you would think at least accessory to murder for sure.
And that would have been
much more of a fair charge.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if we can get past the fact that she was involved in the murder itself, the next crime that happened was destroying the bodies, and that's what she was charged with.
Of course, I had to ask Lannie the question everybody wants to know.
Harold told me where he buried the heads in the lake. He put them down and stepped on them and pushed them down in the mud.
My God.
And they've never been found.
Oh, man. That's cold. James Hewitt offers his thoughts on Ina. Do you think Ina Nokes had a bigger part in the situation than what Harold confessed to? Because I do. Yes. I think she was almost the puppet master.
I think everybody that knows anything about it feels that she was very active. And I think she was not a warm, gracious individual. She was in the basement when Harold killed both the Nokes. She actually went outside, got the hose from their yard, took it inside. They had a tap in the basement and used it to clean everything down. And they cleaned it very, very well. The state later came in with a search warrant to see if there was anything that was a residue of the killing. And all they found were a couple of deer parts.
They were avid hunters, and so they would hunt deer, whatever, wild game, and then they would dress that game in their basement, so they knew what to do.
Yeah, and she was a good hunter, too.
Now, you'll hear during the confession a little later, Harold gives a different answer to Paul Douglas about what he did with the heads, and maybe he did it as a way to make himself look better in the eyes of the prosecutor.
Did you cut him up in its entirety before you went to her? Yes. And while you were cutting him up, where was she? Did you leave her, Mrs. Hoyt, right on the foot of the stairs? And you kept crawling over every time you go up and down the stairs? After you cut him up in its entirety, you had him all wrapped up, is that correct? And then after you had finished with him, then what happened?
I pulled her into the washroom.
And did you go with her the same way you did with him?
Yes.
Do you have any butchering experience?
Only cutting up her own deer.
For instance, I can understand how you would do the limbs, but after you got rid of the 4 limbs, then what would you do with the main body itself?
I had cut down to the back. I cut so the bone in the back was separated, so I had 2 halves. And then I cut probably 3 pieces across through here, so each side is probably, I would guess, in 3 pieces. I would.
Well, then, in the severance of him, did you find the bullet?
It was on the basement floor afterwards.
You know if it went through him, or did it just fall out as you were cutting the body apart?
I don't know which.
And what did you do with that slug?
I threw it away.
Then on her, were you able to find the bullet on her?
Yes, the bullet was just, as a part of the clothing off, the bullet was somewhere up in here, just partially sticking out.
Okay, I guess we'll let him show on tape.
So Harold finds both bullet slugs that killed Edwin and Wilma, and he throws them away. When it came to the internal organs, Harold uses several tall kitchen trash cans to dump the entrails, probably the same ones he would use after he would gut a deer. He drove west of McCook on Highway 6 and 34 to a historic overlook called, and I get this, Massacre Canyon, where a band of Pawnee Indians in the 19th century were attacked and killed by the Sioux. Now, Nokes was not smart enough to understand the irony in choosing that location to hide evidence of his heinous crime. The visceral organs were left for wild animals. They were never found. Nokes worked all through the night on Sunday, September 23rd, into the early morning hours of Monday the 24th. He gathered all of the Hoyt's clothes and personal effects, as well as the clothes he and Ina were wearing that night, and took them to a Department of Roads yard where he burned them in a large fire along with dozens of old wooden guardrail posts. Harold stayed and monitored the fire into the early afternoon. Later that evening, Harold and Ina loaded up their car with the body parts stored in their basement freezer, hitched their boat to the vehicle, and drove 34 miles northeast to Cambridge Lake in Frontier County.
And how did you, tell me how you threw them in?
Unwrapped them and then
Or you unwrapped them?
Yes.
Each one?
Yes.
And then threw them in?
Yes.
Was there a reason why you unwrapped them?
I don't know.
Who? Did somebody drive the boat?
I drove the boat out there and then just, it was a calm evening and just stopped the boat. Got this.
Was there anyone else on the lake?
I didn't see anyone.
I'm sure you were looking for others on the lake.
Yeah, I didn't see anyone.
Now, where did you dump them in the lake? Do you recall?
Just out in the middle of the lake in front of the dam there. I would say about halfway across.
Every one of the parts?
There was a few parts when we got towards the end, but there's a few that floated and took them up the lake quite a ways. Along the shore there, I was gonna first take them and put them back in a wash or something up there in the weeds is what I intended. We got up there and we built a fire and burnt these cartons and the paper that we had out for each individual package and the cartons we burnt in there. And instead of going back, why, I just put these down in the mud back there, and there's a small bay there where we had this fire, and I shoved, I don't even know how to say, 6 pieces, 5, 6 pieces, that would float.
Now, as you were dumping them, how about the heads, which is the part that I'm really interested in? Do you recall what, as you unwrapped them, you certainly noticed which part the heads were.
Sure.
And what did you do with the heads?
With the rest of it.
Right down in the middle of the lake? So if I were to look for those, I'd have to send somebody out to about the middle of the lake, is that right?
As near as I can say, yes.
I've got a map of this lake, Mr. Nokes. I have trouble figuring out what the middle of this lake is.
Well, right in front of the dam and right in front of the rocks there. And
why don't you put your glasses on? Does this give you a... I'll let you look at it so you can get oriented with it.
Harold indicated on a map of the reservoir, commonly called Cambridge Lake by locals, to pinpoint where the body parts were dumped, in hopes of helping authorities recover more remains and the heads. More than a dozen body parts were eventually recovered, but the heads were never found.
You're making a circle right there where...
That's right in front of the dam and about halfway across.
And you're circling about the area that says Area B there.
Yes, that's what I would say is where they was. That's where but all the parts. But there was a few parts that floated.
And the parts that floated, which way would they float? Did you recall you said, would they float in one way or another, or did they just float?
Well, they're just on top of the water and I picked them up.
Okay. I think these, do these X's, Sheriff, indicate where some of the parts were found?
That's right.
I would say right in here some places where, along this here, I would say right in this area.
That was around Sawyer Canyon.
And there's another bay back in here, and it's right along in this, right in this area someplace. I can't tell you exactly. It's dark and right along the beach, and I shoved a few pieces down in the mud. And if they found some up here, they must not have stayed there.
Now the heads, there's not any question but that the heads were dumped in the area that you refer to as Area B.
Yes.
Okay. And this was done on a Monday.
That's right.
Now, did you go back out there on Tuesday?
No.
After you went out and dumped the parts in the lake and did the other things that you've indicated, what did you do?
Took the boat out of the water and went back. Well, the fire, I burnt the cartons and the paper and stuff there. And I threw the knife in the lake.
Where did you throw the knife? Do you have any idea?
We were just going up the lake, and I threw it out someplace between there and between the two places where I don't have any idea.
Then, after you got home, did you do any more cleaning up of the area?
No.
You don't think that your wife did any more scrubbing or?
She might have. She didn't that night, I'm sure, but she might have later.
When did you next go out to the lake?
It was I believe it was on a Saturday. I was thinking it was on Sunday, but after Mr. Roblee and I talked, I'm sure it was on Saturday.
And was there a reason why you went out there that day?
After the few of the parts floated, I went back to see if there was some more that floated.
Was there any?
Yes, there was some. I would guess 7 or 8 pieces. I don't know in that neighborhood. There was something. So I didn't count.
Was your wife with you?
She was in the car. She didn't go down to the lake's edge.
And what did you find those pieces?
Yes.
And what did you do with them?
I just laid a rock on them. They were forced up against the dam, and I just laid them in against the rocks with another rock on top of them.
Did you do anything else in connection with this case, or disposing of the body, or anything else after that? After that Saturday?
No.
Did you and your wife ever get together and put your stories together?
We talked about it, some, yes.
Before the law enforcement officers talked to you?
Yes. Hasn't been much else talked about since this happened with this.
Well, did you correlate a story of some kind together?
Well, some of it we probably did some before the law enforcement, but after they talked to me, I told them I went on a Tuesday because I took a day of vacation that Tuesday, but it was on Monday that I went to the lake and did this.
What did you do on your vacation on that Tuesday?
I went to Holy's.
And you and your wife evidently correlated that story that you had gone to the lake on a Tuesday, hadn't you, or had you?
I don't believe we talked about that until after I'd been questioned, and I told her that's what I told them is that Tuesday.
I think if I talked to your wife, she'd tell me the same story.
Nares, I know she would. Mrs. Nares, I might be some small details that, especially after this happened that night, some of it is a little hazy. I don't know. It's something you don't do every day.
You think she'd tell me that she did know or didn't know whether you had the gun when you went to the Hoyts?
I don't know. I didn't think she knew it if she did.
She didn't mention it to you?
No.
What did you expect to get from the confrontation with Mr. Hoyt?
I just wanted to clear the air, so I didn't want all these hard feelings.
And how were you going to clear the air?
Get the facts out in the open, so I felt like if they knew all the facts, some of them, they wouldn't have harsh feelings like they did. He kept talking about the blackmail and that, and I couldn't see that. I thought if we could, I just wanted to get it straightened out.
How are you going to get it straightened out?
By trying to get all the facts out.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't understand why you took him to your home to get the facts straightened out.
So Kate could come over. We went there so that she could call. Mrs. Hoyt was going to call Kay and ask Kay to come over.
And why didn't Mrs. Hoyt call Kay to come over?
Because this all took place as soon as we got in the house. Why, he got loud and they aimed to as soon as we got in the house. That was the purpose of going there.
Yes. I assume that the purpose in going to your home and all of you visiting was to call Kay to come over.
Yes.
But you all went downstairs where there's no telephone.
Went down there. When we got in the house, Mr. Hoyt got pretty loud when we got in the house. And I didn't expect to go to the basement, but I did make some remark that, make so much noise while I go to the basement so all the neighbors wouldn't hear at least. And he just took right off to the basement. So we got there.
Did you tell your wife to call Kay to come over? I mean, that was the purpose of it.
This all happened too quick for that. That's what we was going to do, yes. But we didn't ever get to that point.
You think if I'd run you on a polygraph that all this would be true, what you told me?
I hope so. I sure would admit to something like this if I didn't do it.
I'm sure that you would admit killing these folks if you didn't do it. But my experience has been even someone who admits the killing of someone has a tendency to say it in their best light. That's what I'm trying to find out from you.
Well, that's as near as I can tell you what happened.
You don't think the polygraph test would show that you brought the Hoyts over there to the house for the sole purpose of killing them?
Well, I didn't anyway.
Well, that's what I'm asking, because I don't know what goes on in your mind.
Well, we went there. If I was going to kill these people, I sure wouldn't have taken them home.
I hate to ask you the next question. Where would you take them?
I can't think I'd even thought about that, doing it. It wouldn't be my own house. Didn't have the trouble getting them out there. I thought in my own mind it'd been easier to done at their place and left than it would there. I don't know.
And you're telling me that the only reason that you cut them up was so that you could transport them out of the house?
That's correct.
And that was the only reason you cut them up?
That's correct.
You didn't cut them up for the sole purpose of disposing of the body so it couldn't be found?
the main thing was get them out of the house, and I, at the time, probably didn't want them to be found. That's true.
Is this any different than anything that he said to you, Sheriff? Because I don't know what he
That
said.
sounds just like what he told me.
Is there any phase of it that you went into that we've not talked about?
Yeah, we talked about what he did with the axe, and also what he did with the personal possessions like the glasses, and billfold, and so forth.
What did happen with the glasses and the billfold?
The glasses and those things were put in that. The next day when I went across the lake up Trenton, I threw them off the spillway, right in front of the spillway, and then right there, like in the Trenton Lake. And her purse and that stuff was burned with the clothing.
And the axe?
The axe was put in the Frenchman River south of Culberson. I showed him where, told him where.
Yeah. And when did you do that?
On Monday.
After you burned the clothes?
Well, the axe, I threw the axe in the Frenchman right after I burnt the clothes and other effects. I run up to Trenton just before I come back and started the fire. When I left McCook, I went up to Trenton Lake and threw them in and then come back to the fire at Culberson Yard and burnt the other stuff.
Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to tell me about?
Well, there is some aspects that most of this point in my direction where everything, like in Kay's benefit, for example, there was times when this whole affair started after I'd seen her a few times. I called her and I asked her not to ever call me again because it didn't think it'd work, and I told her not to ever call unless she wanted this to be a lasting thing, and she called right back and said it had to be, and I quite a bit through the relationship I told her different times that I was a lot older than her and it wasn't a working relation, and something that just couldn't last, but she begged to keep it as it was. And so I did, and after she'd separated from her husband, I told her once I thought she'd be much better off if she went back to her husband, and she said no, she couldn't do that. And she begged to keep all of her relations just as it was all the time up until January, February, I'd say, this year.
Anything else that you want to tell me that I've not asked you about?
I'll probably think of several things later, but I can't think of anything right at the present time. There was no excuse for me taking the gun when out there. I know that now, but I thought when I took the gun along, my arm was, Mr. Schroeder had a statement, I don't know if he still does or not, of what use I had of my arm at this particular time, which is very low, and I still have very little use of it as far as that's concerned. I've got more now than I did 3 months ago, but it's very little use of it. And I took it along. I thought that would stop trouble if there was any. And on the signed things, I wrote some, but there's an awful lot of them I didn't write. And I seen some before I wrote any others. And on the grass, as far as that part's concerned, I took those 2-gallon jugs and poured them down. And as I walked, I just let them run out. And I can't say it or prove it or anything, whether anybody else had anything to do with it or what happened. But my own mind, I feel like that there was something done to the grass after I did, because there was 2 strips that just got about so wide where you can see definitely where I'd killed. And all of a sudden, the whole yard pretty near died. That ain't the way from the experience I've had as a ground killer, it's not the way it reacts.
Anything else?
That was brought up to the fact that this loaned her this money for the car, and a lot of the time when I seen her alone, I give her money as far as to help her get along. I'd give her $20 or whatever, quite often when I'd see her. $10, whatever head that I could spare at that particular time.
How much money do you think you gave her altogether?
I never kept track. I really don't know. A few $100s, how much I know. And the $400 she brought over, I told her I didn't want it, and she just showed it on the television and laughed. As far as wanting that money, I did not want it.
Anything else you want to tell?
Anything right now.
Sheriff, you have anything you want to ask him or talk about?
Something that interests me is in the basement, what kind of a pistol is that, Harold?
It's a Ruger 22 pistol.
Single action?
Automatic.
Automatic. Is there safety on it?
Yeah.
You have to cock it before you can fire it the first time?
It has to be loaded before it. As soon as it's loaded, it's ready to go. It's on safe. There's a little clip that I had it loaded, and all I had to do is clip the safe off, and it's ready to go.
You didn't have to cock it?
No.
It was already cocked? Or you don't
you don't have to cock it. It's loaded, and it's just a safe on it.
So when you pulled the pistol out of your belt, you just...
I had to clip the safe off.
What side's the safe on it?
I never used it enough to be right sure, but I think it'd be on the left side of the pistol, but I'm not.
How would you run it with your left hand?
I don't know whether I took it off with the right hand, or I just don't know. It happened so quick that I couldn't tell you. I honestly don't know. It may seem odd, but there's several things that night, especially after that happened, that I don't know. I can't honestly tell you. Near as what I've told you is right, as near as I know in my own mind.
That's all.
Fred?
No question.
Dick, is there anything?
Yeah, I'd like to clarify a few things.
So the man Paul Douglas just mentioned, Dick, is the Nokeses' criminal defense attorney, Richard Hove. Because this was Harold's formal confession that would be used by a judge in determining his final sentencing for the murders of the Hoyts, and even though a plea deal had been made by the prosecutors to take the death penalty off the table, the judge could still overturn the agreement and sentence Harold Nokes to death. The questions by Hove were his attempt to mitigate Nokes' crime against the Hoyts.
Harold and I indicated that your intention when you bought the gun was to target practice. Did you at that time have any intention of killing any person?
No. The last thought I ever had.
I want to clarify further the fact that when you put the gun in your trousers that evening, did you at that time think that you would be killing anyone that evening?
No, I had no idea. If I had stayed home. I put it in there figuring if there was trouble. I knew I couldn't protect myself, and I didn't want to be worked over. I knew, but especially going out there, I could be very easily, and that's the reason I took it. I thought everything was going real smooth until we got back pretty well to town. That's when Mr. Hoyt got aggravated, and the biggest thing that bothered him was the fact that the case stayed at our place when he got out of the hospital, and he just kept going over and over that. And that's the part that bothered him. But I don't know what Kay's told him. Kay called and asked if she could come to our place to stay. And she also said that she wouldn't go to her folks and stay in the hospital first.
When you got the gun out to take it with you, did you think that you might have to shoot someone that evening, or did you think that you might have to use it in order to repel someone's attack?
I thought it might stop from having any trouble. I figured if trouble started, it might prevent trouble, is what I thought. And
did you think that you might have to fire it, or that you
No.
would be able to stop the trouble by just...
I never expected anything like that.
Now, after you got back to the house and went downstairs, you said that things are a little fuzzy in your mind.
That's correct.
I presume that some of the details that you've related you're not exactly sure of.
Some of them could be off. That's near as I remember is what happened. I do. The fact that at least I hear it every day. Wake up once in a while that she screamed, "Why didn't you kill Kay?" And started up the stairs screaming, and that there's a very short time between I shot him and her. And then
When you first went downstairs, did you go immediately into Edwin, go immediately into the washroom?
we just got down there, and very little was said of thing, and he gave me a motion to come in with him, and he walked in.
What was his voice like at that time? Was he shouting?
He was real angry, and
What was he saying? Do you remember?
he said that I'd been lying about his daughter and trying to cause trouble between him and between the two of them and Kay all the
Did he
time.
call you any names other than liar?
No, I'd say liar. That's all I can remember that he called me. I was just felt like I was interfering with their family.
Okay, now when he got over by the sink and took off his glasses, do you recall what he said to you then?
There as I can remember, he said that you've had about enough of this, and then he started my direction.
How did he come at you? Come at you fast?
It seemed like he was stepping right over. Yes, and he had he brought back with his right hand like he was going to swing.
Were you scared?
Well, yes, I didn't especially want to be worked over. So I pulled the gun out and I shot him. That's all I know.
What'd you feel like?
I don't know. I just have a nightmare. I just kind of numb, I guess you'd say. I know after it happened, I should have called the law. I didn't want my wife involved. She really wasn't at all that way, and I asked her to leave, and she wouldn't leave. So the only thing I could think of where I could get them out, so I kind of.
What time in the morning was it that you finished?
And I got back.
Did you go to Trenton's last thing?
Yes.
That was after everything had been wrapped?
Yes. Yes, everything was put in the deep freeze, and I got back just in time to get cleaned up and ready to go to work, just so I get to work on time. It took all night.
Do you recall what other thoughts passed through your mind, or did any other thoughts pass through your mind as to what to do with bodies?
Well, I couldn't. It's the only thing I could think of. I couldn't drag them up the stairs, and I couldn't get rid of them. And that's the only thing I thought I could do with them. If I was to try to get rid of them, I have no other way to get them out. That was the most unhuman thing, was to cut them up. I know. I shouldn't have done that. I don't know how I was able to cut them up.
Did you consider burying them?
When I got them out, I debated on what to do. Main thought I could have just to get them out of the house. To try to bury them, I couldn't hardly dug a hole very easily with one arm.
I neglected to ask you about the automobile of the Hoyts. Whatever happened to the automobile?
We went and took it over and parked it in front of the hospital. I told the wife to drive it over and I'd pick her up.
When was the car taken to the hospital?
Just before I started cutting up the parts. I suppose an hour after I shot him, I don't know, that neighborhood.
Oh, so after you shot him, then the first thing you did was you moved the car.
Moved the car before I started cutting the parts up, yes. I would say probably an hour after I shot him, I took the car and put it up.
Who drove the car over there?
She drove the car, and then I drove our car over and picked her up.
And where did she drive the car?
Over to the front of the hospital where they found it.
Do you know if anybody saw you when you drove the car up there?
No, I didn't.
And then did you drive right up to the car for her to get in, or did she meet you?
She walked the end of the block south, and I picked her up right to the south end of that block. I picked her up there.
You had some other discussions with Mr. Hoyt, evidently, and when he got mad. Is that right? Is that what made you suspicious?
Yes.
Well, at that time, did he try to attack you at any time?
No. I didn't really expect trouble, but I took the gun along just in case there was.
I assume if your attorney has no objections, you'd be willing to take a polygraph test to verify everything on the polygraph that you're telling me here.
Well, I can't admit to anything any worse than I already have. I'm admitted to killing people and cutting them up. I never aimed to kill anybody. I've never had trouble with the law before. And everybody wants to figure I did. I've told my story, and I'm ready for whatever justice you feel like is necessary.
I don't want to be argumentative with you, but you and I argued about this a little while ago when we were telling you this thing. And my argument to you at that time was, if all you intended to do was to scare him, if the one thing you didn't do with the gun was scare him.
I see that I didn't.
I mean, you didn't flash it at him, you don't even know if he ever saw the gun. You didn't try to sidestep him. After you shot him, you didn't go over to see whether he was alive or dead. You didn't try to prevent her from leaving. You certainly could have done that very easily. It looks like the only thing you intended to do with that gun was to shoot it. I mean, that's the impression I get from what you told me. I would think that if I'm going to go over to somebody's house to discuss something with him, I would have called him to find out his mood instead of going over there with a gun. Could have invited them to your home a lot easier than going over there with a gun and having them come to your home. You never made any attempt to get a hold of Kay, which is what the purpose of going to your home was. These are the areas that I'd like to see something.
This happened before I had a chance to call.
I realize, but if you're going to go downstairs and discuss it, there's no way you're going to call her from the basement. There's no phone down there.
I wasn't the one that went to the basement first. You went to the basement first.
I know, but you were the second one downstairs. There was no effort by anyone to call Kay. Well, unless you have anything else to say, Mr.
That's all I can think of.
Thank you. Sure? Okay.
And so the question still remains, why? How did things get so far out of hand that two people not directly involved in the relationship between Harold, Ina, and Kay would be killed and slaughtered in such a grotesque way? Book author James Hewitt shared details of the case with a forensic psychologist, Dr. Daniel Baldwin. Based solely on the information presented, Dr. Baldwin gave an opinion as best he could as to why the parties did what they claimed or admitted. And I'm reading directly from the book now. Dr. Baldwin felt that Harold Nokes was probably tired and bored with his wife. He was flattered by the attention of Kay Hein, and once he started receiving her sexual favors, he could not bear to stop. He became addicted. His reason fled. Dr. Baldwin believes that Harold could not bear to believe that Kay tired of the affair after she realized that marriage to Harold was not in the cards. Harold then transferred his anger at her onto her parents. Harold thought the parents were the problem, since they had chastised him about demanding blackmail money from Kay. Because he had been successful in enticing Kay and Ina into the menage a trois, he believed he could convince the Hoyts that there was nothing amiss in their relationship. Kay had spurned him and turned to her parents for help, so the only way he could seek revenge was to pacify or eliminate the parents. Baldwin speculated Nokes must have believed that if he could not persuade the Hoyts with logical arguments, he could intimidate them, which may be the reason for him taking along a pistol when he visited their home, if, in fact, he did take a gun. The ultimate act of shooting the Hoyts was a manifestation of Harold's belief that he had to win, no matter what, and a way to take revenge on Kay for her leaving him. Dr. Baldwin thought it was highly unusual for Ina Nokes to have been involved in this sexual relationship, and speculated that the Nokeses might have had a shared psychosis, a folie à deux, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a mental disorder in which the personality is seriously disorganized. And Dr. Baldwin thought Kay might well be bipolar, a personality disorder characterized by episodes of mania and depression. Kay's promiscuity, her lack of judgment, and her lack of restraint were symptomatic of the disorder. On March 22, 1974, Harold Nokes was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for the first-degree murder of Wilma Hoyt and the second-degree murder of Edwin Hoyt. Nokes later appealed the convictions, contending he did not voluntarily plead guilty, so basically claiming everything we just heard him say was coerced. And I'm sure his confession was played back for the judges considering his appeal as proof that he was very agreeable to telling his story. I mean, you could hear it in his voice. He was just very cooperative. The Nebraska Supreme Court upheld the conviction. Harold Nokes died in the Nebraska State Pen in February 2017 at the age of 88. Ina Nokes spent a few years in a women's correctional facility for illegally disposing of dead bodies. She then moved to Lincoln to be closer to Harold and reportedly visited him several times a week for decades. Ina passed away in Minden, Nebraska on April 25, 2021, at the ripe old age of 91. Kay Hein abruptly left McCook, Nebraska in the spring of 1974 and moved to Merced, California with her 2 daughters. She eventually met and married another man, James Allen, a fruit stand owner. 4 years later, in 1978, Kay sent a letter to her sister-in-law who was living in Kansas. This is part of what she wrote. The letter is dated April 7, 1978. I don't really know if you know the true and real reason why I left. I only did this from advice from 3 patrol officers and then asking advice from an aunt and uncle and some very close friends who also told me I should just leave. I am and still am not running away from any of this. I loved a married man, and he did kill our parents. Am I to die also because of what he did a half a year after I told him I didn't want to see him anymore if he didn't leave his wife? I only turn to one thing in my life now, God. If I wouldn't have, I wouldn't be here today. Dad asked me then if I would ever see Harold again. I told him definitely not. He said, okay. I loved a married man, which no one knew about till Mom and Dad were killed. And all I could do was go ahead. This I was doing. As far as blackmail for him to leave me alone and stop bugging me, I did pay him. Dad knew this also. I was told to shut up when all the explanations were taking place, as my being doesn't really matter. Only a few of his lies really do hurt. Someday, maybe he can find himself enough to say why. Well, God is real to me now, and I will make it. Better sign off for now and pray you'll find time to write. I guess I am too dumb to just give up and quit, which would be so very easy at times. Our love, Kay, Angie, and Brenda. The Allens retired in Harpster, Idaho, and seemed to enjoy their lives until James passed away. Remember the name Vince Wasia from an earlier episode, the high school all-state running back who played football with Kay's first husband, Dwayne Hein, on the Class B state championship Bison football team? Well, Kay reached out to him. Vince was living in California, and his wife also recently passed. Today, they're married and living their golden years in New Braunfels, Texas. On the very first episode, I mentioned one of the reasons I'm so fascinated by this case. It's because I crossed paths with Harold. And here's what happened. In southwest Nebraska, the Hoyt murders were the crime of the century. Every detail of the case was plastered on the front page of the McCook Daily Gazette, the local newspaper. Circulation increased 30%. And I was a 12-year-old paper boy at the time. Now, to this day, the Gazette's base operations are literally across the alley from the Red Willow County Courthouse and its jail. After the Nokeses were arrested and charged with the murders, they were brought into court on occasion. And one day, I was cutting across the alley to start my paper route when sheriff's deputies brought Harold out in handcuffs. And before they could open the car door and put him in the back of the squad car, Harold Nokes looked right at me. Felt like he stared at me for 10 minutes. And I'm sure it was only a second or two, but I knew who he was, I knew what he did, and the fact that he made eye contact freaked me the hell out. And it's always stuck with me, even to this day. You've heard this tragic story told by the people who were involved, so now you get to ask yourself, were they telling the truth? Was justice truly served? You get to make up your own mind about it, but somehow, I don't know, I'm not sure we still know the whole truth and the whole story. I spoke with former Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee to get his final thoughts about it.
Law enforcement's a tough job. I know being in a rural area and being isolated from a lot of it is hard, but if you work at it, you can accomplish a lot, and I think we did in this case, and it wasn't just Frontier County, but it was everybody involved.
This made national news. It was in Newsweek magazine,
Yeah.
national newspaper.
Shows a saint in the lake
Yes.
in Newsweek,
Right. And-
O.J. Simpson was in the same magazine. No,
Different OJ at the time.
no, it was before his.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
It was a different OJ. It was the good OJ. He was the star running back OJ.
There you go.
But how weird. O.J. Simpson in the same edition of Newsweek magazine on this heinous murder, double murder. And O.J. soon, it's like a foreshadowing. Crazy. Crazy.
Oh.
But it goes to show you that, we have this. I think that what's interesting about this case is it was happening right when Watergate was happening. And so America was kind of going through this turmoil of losing trust and faith in the government, especially in the Oval Office. And then you have a case like this that happens in small town, quiet, rural America, Main Street, USA, where there's, this tawdry sexual exploits between all these people, and then a murder of two innocent people not connected to the relationship really directly, and they're butchered and they're thrown in a lake. And it just crushes you. Like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
And we're kind of like going through that phase again in this country with just all the craziness and crime in the cities and politics and people trying to storm the Capitol. It's just, what the hell is going on?
Well, we're trying to keep it safe out here in Nebraska, but I don't.
I'm telling you, here's what America needs. America needs $3 vodka sodas. Where will they find that? Right here in Curtis, Nebraska. America, your salvation is in Curtis, Nebraska for $3.
Very good. Very good.
Sheriff Roblee, thank you so much for being on the Across the Dinerverse podcast and getting us this nice place here at the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis.
Right.
But thank you most of all for your service to this county, to this state, and wish you the best of luck and a long life ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Across the Dinerverse, and a huge thank you to Marvin Fisher and the entire staff at the Anvil Bar and Grill in Curtis for hosting this entire true crime podcast series. Also, a huge thanks to retired Frontier County Sheriff Lannie Roblee and author James Hewitt for their contributions, including case files and the actual recordings of the confessions and tape depositions. Hewitt's book, In Cold Storage, is available through the University of Nebraska Press or Amazon. If you like the podcast and want to support the show, please visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dinerverse. And this week I will be posting Kay Hein's letter, along with case files and photos that you can actually see for as little as $3 a month. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. Original theme music by Keith Brock and the Kings Who Rock. Across the Dinerverse, always searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. What's your story?